sick and tired of hearing things from uptight, short-sighted, narrow-minded hypocritics. All I want is the truth. Just give me some truth.
We are a collective, we're a team, and we've got to fix this. The media is owned by 6 corporations. I mean, we're being told what to believe. We have to be able to develop our own critical thinking ability so we can see past the lies.
Okay, now for years we've had people talking about the corporate enslavement of humanity, and there's been so many people looking to explain it, and you can be sitting in groups of intelligent people and they're all saying, what, there's no evidence for that, it's all very conspiratorial. Well, I've been showing in my work for years that actually the symbols of slavery have been staring us in the face our whole lives. So let me just show you what I mean here, where it can be done very simply. Okay, so these are probably symbols that you all recognise. You've probably all seen them somewhere before. I don't need to name them, but I will, so we make the point. What's this part here called? It's called the collar, so we'll call that the collar. And what's this part here called? This part is the cuffs. You'd be correct if you said that. The cuffs. And of course down here, the bit round the neck, we have the tie. Now, if I invite you to consider who wears a collar, cuffs and a tie, and just think about it, what would be the right answer? This is an example of spelling where we're tricked by the context of the fabric. If these were made of metal, we might have a better sense of what they're actually symbols of. So the collar, the cuffs and the tie are symbols of slavery or for prisoners. It's only they who wear the collar, the cuffs and the tie. And in our culture we have a graded collar system. So we have blue collar for a certain type of worker. We have white collar for another kind. We have dog collar for those that are doing the work of the church. And then we've got obviously things like our police, where all our police are known by their collar number. So the collar number for the police. It's massively significant that we live in a graded collar system. It's also very significant that it's only the men that have to wear a collar, and there's only certain places that you can go without having a collar on. So there's a lot of establishments, corporate establishments especially, where you can't get in unless you're collared. And these are not of accidental significance.
So before we get on to the main subject matter tonight, I want to talk about just a few sort of like peripheral but very related things. And one of the things I want to talk about is how excited or mentally excited everybody seems to be about this year. You know, there's, I think, and not just about this year, just in general, we are the most mentally stimulated generation of our species ever to have walked the planet. There's nobody that's been bombarded with as much mental information to process as you lot have, ever. The amount you get hammered with every day is more than people a few hundred years ago would have faced in their life. And it's something that deserves a bit of credit because we seem to have kind of sacrificed, without realising it, some of the depth and substance of our life in favour of an excited but shallow buzz where we all know a little bit about everything and we end up becoming a bit of a know-it-all. And you know, I think we have become this culture of know-it-all awakened people who are all casually partying their way to their ascension in some way by some people. I'm not saying everybody is, but I'm just saying that there's an element of a current there. And I want to talk about it because everybody is reacting to stories that they've heard about the world and about themselves and about who they are and what they are. And maybe it's backed up by some experience or some insight that you yourself have had. But most people seem to be reacting to stories that they've picked up from somewhere else. And if we look at the stories that relate to this year and these times, they don't really get much bigger. Okay? They don't get much bigger than the stories of this particular year, do they? I mean, we're looking at end of the Mayan calendar that a lot of people are getting all buzzed up about, which could be anything. We've got people who are expecting aliens who are benign and aliens who aren't benign. We've got people who are waiting for comets and solar flares. We've got folks who are waiting for systemic collapse and shutdown, and I mean, the list goes on. And all of these stories are absolutely monumental. Because think about it, if any of them came to pass, if any of them, would life as we know it continue the next day? And the reality is, for most of them, I think the answer is no. It would vary depending on whether we were looking at solar flares or aliens or ascension or whatever. But the reality is that they're massive stories that I know quite a lot of people who are basing their current decisions on those future stories. And so I know people who are saying, oh, well, you know, we've only got a few months to go, or I'm not going to pay this because we've only got till the end of this year, and things like that. And it's a real concern because this happened in the year 2000, when everybody future-loaded their awareness and their attention and their passions and sat about casually while lots and lots of months passed in the interim. And my concern is that why so many people are waiting for these exciting stories to manifest, that the erosion of our sort of community values and fundamental relationship interactions is continuing to be eroded at a large scale level. Part of the focus of tonight's talk is to get us to make use of the time that we have before whichever our chosen story decides to land upon our laps and deliver us the glory that we've all been seeking. But until then, tonight is about how we can use the time in between effectively to revisit some of the things that may be neglected. And again, places like this college project are great for trying to get into the nitty-gritty of what community actually is and how we can make it happen without requiring externally imposed structures. So, how do we get around this buzz, this excitement? It's an interesting thing because most people go to the same place to get their buzz, to get their story, to get their fix. And what do we call it? Where do we go to get the internet? That's right. So as some of you know, I go on all the time about spells and words being spells and the impact of the ones that are staring us in the face. And I just invite you to consider that the two spells, that is the two words that we use to refer to that place where we go for our big story fix, are what are the words? The net and the web. Okay, let's just look at those words in a different context. The net and the web. Okay, who likes to think that they are the fisherman and the spider dancing out across the net or the web to get their hit? Well, you are up to a point, until the point that you're no longer in control and you find yourself losing 4 hours looking at inane and nonsensical YouTube comments or something like that. Anyone found themselves doing that? I've been there. The entertainment is endless, isn't it? The banality is absolutely ceaseless. But this is part of the problem. This is part of the problem. As a species, we've never been presented with, I mean, we all take them for granted now, but computers are the most multifunctional tool humans have ever had placed at our disposal. Everything else is generally just for a few things. A screwdriver is for screws. You can't hammer things with it. A hammer's for nails. You can't screw things with it. Same with most of the tools that we're used to. But computers are something you can do a whole bunch of things with. You ever find yourself sitting in front of a computer going, what am I going to do? You know, just staring at the screen. You know, have you ever been there? Exactly, that's what I mean. And I think we should recognize it and discuss it because it's a discipline that we have to learn. You know, it's a tool that's taking more of our time than it should do, and rather than being the fisherman and the spider, we become the fish and the fly. And we become jacked up on the story. We then vent our emotional content and our depth and our substance into it, and then not go out and do stuff. Have you ever done that, where you just feel better because the forum's got it all? It's like, oh, I feel better now. I feel like I've done my bit. You know, and actually that passion and that verve and that fire that you felt is actually spent. You've spent 3 hours crafting your post or whatever it is, or making your little video and sending it out there. And I'm not saying that's not a good thing. It obviously is. But I'm just suggesting we need to revisit the balance of these things and check in with our excitement fix and our story fix. Because one of the common threads in all of these stories, every single one of them, from Benjamin Fulford to Ascension to Aliens to Comets to Solar Flares, is that you don't have to do anything. Every single one of them is about it being taken out of your hands and somebody else or something else taking care of it. And actually, I discovered that I stumbled upon this sort of a name that I worked a lot in mental health, and I have a name for this complex, and it's actually Messiah complex. But it's the other side of Messiah complex. We're all familiar with the first side of Messiah complex, where you've got people like David Icke or Bill Hicks or Terence Trent D'Arby who have had awakenings and actually renamed themselves the Messiah in one way or another, or thought that they were, or made the statement publicly that they were. That is the version that we're familiar with. The version we're not familiar with is the other side of Messiah complex, which is where we're waiting for someone else to do the work and save us. We're waiting for someone else to bail our community out. That is Messiah complex and is no different to walking about thinking that you're Jesus. It's no different. It's just the other side of the coin. One is the one thinking they're going to save, and the other one is waiting to be saved. And I just invite you to consider which one you might be, because one might be better than the other. I'm not sure, you know, which is better, a whole bunch of people sitting about waiting for Jesus or a whole bunch of people thinking they are him. You know, you choose, you know. That's it. But it's a really interesting thing. And again, it really ties in to this net and web effect, because if we can go in there and we get our high and we get our fix, we can feel a little bit better up against the backdrop of all the other news, which, all these other stories, which are supposed to be enlightening and awakening, but can often have the hidden undercurrent that you might not consciously notice of making you feel powerless and helpless, or making you feel impotent and actually unable to do anything about it. And that is the double-edged sword of alternative media, where one side is like, yeah, all this truth, all this juice, you know, here we are, truth juice, you know, come and get your fix of a dose of truth. But it is a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, you can be like, did you know that they're doing this? Oh my goodness me, what an affront. We need to stop supporting corporate mayhem and destruction of the planet and do something else. Yeah, anyway, I think you get the point on Messiah complex. I don't think I need to belabor that point much, do I? But again, just to factor that in what we're covering tonight and how it applies to our lives. So mentally excited, we're all a bunch of mentally excited messiahs, either one side of the coin or the other. My big concern about alternative media, I just want to talk a little bit more about it, is the ongoing double-edged sword side of it, which is there's another undercurrent to it. Not only is there the powerlessness of it, but there is the fact that it is somebody else's story of the world, not yours. Okay? And that's really important, because if you consider yourself to be an awakened individual, or if you've had any awakening experiences whatsoever, it is even more important what you think, what anybody else thinks. Because the power of your thought process and your co-creating power is worth 10 times some fluoridated McDonald's eating sheep out there. And it's a real concern of mine that all you great awakened folk are being exploited to tell somebody else's story of the world. And I'm worried about that. Because if all of the so-called awakened and energized and activist people are all repeating the same stories of horror, then I'm really worried. Because it doesn't matter really what 50,000 sedated, fluoridated people are thinking, not that much, because they're being, you know, operating at such a low level and such a low vibration of thought process, we don't have to worry too much. But when you creative bright sparks, you know, emancipated, liberated, energized lot, when you start thinking all the dark thoughts and describing a dark future, I get worried. Because, you know, despite what you may be thinking about the positive side of your life, there's all the peripheral stuff that we unconsciously buy into, sure, you know, purely by our engagement with it. And what we're going to be looking at tonight, and the balance of our authority, which is obviously the first word of tonight's talk, is actually how we can maintain the balance of being aware of what's going on, but without, hopefully, feeding it, making it worse, and adding to its manifestation. Because 12 people in a room, doesn't matter how nasty they are or how long their system has been affected, 12 people in a room cannot change the world by themselves. But if they get a whole bunch of other people to repeat their story of the world, it will become the manifest truth. So I just invite you to consider that as well as the future unfolds, where more and more stories surround you. Because one thing is for sure, the stories are not going to get less dramatic. They're not. It's just not going to get less dramatic. They're not going to get smaller, because that's not the way this mental excitement bubble works. It's going to go until it manifests or it pops. One of the two. That's it. So tonight is very much, all three elements I'm going to be looking at tonight are about how you can manage in amongst that. Because you're going to feel, you know, all those messages of oppression, control, whatever, are going to continue to come, and we need to be ever more careful how we manage our space. Are you trying to sneak in here, small child of mine? Are you trying to crawl in under the radar? Normally she would just walk up. Okay. So, what we're going to be, the last thing I want to say before we begin is, if we haven't already begun, is about this idea of truth. And the fact is that there's tons of truth out there. You can go on the net or the web and you can jack yourself up on as much truth as you like and read as much of it, watch as much of it as you like, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it can get you nowhere. Because just because something is true, it doesn't mean it's important. It doesn't mean it's relevant. I mean relevant to you and your future. And it doesn't mean it can take you anywhere. And I'm only interested, I've been surrounded by so much cack in my life, I'm only interested in that stuff which goes somewhere, it's important, it's relevant. Because I'm, you know, all of us are bombarded so much, surely we should start to have a bit of assertiveness over what we want to fill our minds and the spaces of that with, you know, and what stories we want to be repeating. And so I want to try and always use the time that I have with you, however short it is, to try and just stay on what's important and what's relevant. And tonight's distillation is, I think, very important and relevant for anybody not just interested in the sovereign or the free man movement, but anyone interested in finding out how they can move to express themselves more confidently and in a more empowered fashion in their life. It's such an important point because I want everybody to just, it's such a cliche, but it's going to happen, so you better all do it. And we need to turn around and look at everybody in this room. You don't have to make eye contact, you don't have to do anything like that, you don't have to introduce yourself, I just want you to look. None of them bite, no, there's no monsters, yeah, it's all right. Okay. Did anybody see anybody that looked like them? Did you see anybody that looked like you? No? Did you see anybody that dressed like you? No? No. So why is it we're all so transfixed on looking to others for some idea as to what our story might be, as to what our truth might be, as to what message we may have to bring? Because we all do it a little bit. That's part of that seeking aspect within us. But we're at a time now, I think, where it's a time for us to own it. I think we're going through a massive space initiation. I'm not going to talk about that just now, tonight, but you know, a massive initiation of, can you own your space? Can you actually manage the integrity of your boundary? It's a very significant thing because for most of us, you've been confident enough to wear the clothes that you want for most of your life. You've been confident enough to wear your hair in the style that you want, or have facial hair or not for the guys, whatever it is. But how many of us actually have the confidence to speak the truth of our unique interpretation of things? How many of us allow the truth of our being and our story, or what we may have intuited or sensed in our life, how many of us allow that to spill over into the same visibility as our clothes and our hair? Because I think that's the challenge that's before us. And my concern is, as the so-called awakened, and certainly the seekers who are here tonight and who may be watching, my concern is that if we cannot take that courageous maneuver to own our space and move beyond our individuality simply being a conversation amongst like-minded friends or having our unique choice of clothing, if we can't move beyond it and boldly own our space throughout the day on a daily basis, then I think we're screwed. And I think the responsibility lies equally in all of our hands. Because I can't be there in Bristol when, you know, Bristol people need to feel a sense of community, but you guys are. And one of the things we're going to look at tonight is how much of a controlling hand all of us have in the levels of community and humanity that our fellow human beings experience on a daily basis. All of you hold an ace trump in that arena. And we're not aware of it because we're all waiting for somebody else to do it first. Or not all of us, but, you know, some of us. So please, nobody think I'm talking about you, but if you do feel like I'm talking about you, maybe there's something to look at. So, swiftly moving on, yeah. So, for those of you that know me from the free man and the sovereign stuff, you might have heard of the People's Public Trust. I'll talk about that at the end of tonight. But through my work in that arena, I've been exposed to a lot of cases, as in court cases, or a lot of situations where people have challenged authority or have had encounters with so-called authority. And also just, you know, being in, you know, having taught and spoken in a number of different arenas for almost a decade now, I've encountered lots of avenues and areas of life where people are looking to find their power and express themselves. Everything from hippies to yogis to spiritual crowds to activists. You know, I've been around quite a few arenas of our culture, and I've found a few common threads. And tonight is about the common threads, because I've realised we can get rid of the situations and we can get rid of the methods that we're looking at, and there's a few key points that are the same for all of us in any situation in terms of this desire to exercise our authority. And that's what we're going to look at. So, authority is an interesting word, because, I mean, those of you who are into the sovereign free man movement, you might have heard that, you know, it's about authorising. And authorising is about authoring. Now, authoring is what? It's writing, isn't it? So, the whole concept of authority is who is writing the story of the daily world, who is writing the story of daily conduct, who is writing the story of daily guidelines. And the one that we're indoctrinated into is the one where you have no authority and you are taught from as young as 4 to pay attention and that everybody else is authority. That then means that when you're spat out into life, exercising your authority can be a very difficult thing because you've had years of conditioning saying you don't have any.
You will respect authority and you will obey the rules, just like everybody else. That's discipline. Most kids know that by the time they reach your age. Shut it. And keep it shut.
So, how do we reclaim the power to be the author of our life, to authorize, to give ourselves the authority to authorize? You're authorized, you know. Is that what we need? Do we need somebody to say, you're authorized to do what you need to do? Because some of us do feel that. One thing I noticed very much in the spiritual sort of healing movement was people who had awakenings to talents that they had, but they still felt the need to go and get a certificate in something they didn't do, like Reiki or aromatherapy or something like that. Does anybody know people who have done that? And they've gone out and tallied themselves up a whole tally of certificates. And it's all because they don't feel the courage and the confidence to say, I can authorize my own ability and maybe it doesn't have a name, but I'm still going to do it. Instead, we need to go to somebody else to give us a bit of paper so we can say, look, you know, they've said I'm good at this. I'm good at this. See, somebody else says I'm approved, I'm authorized, I'm sanctioned. And this is the power of spells. We're totally dependent on the piece of paper with the spells on it to give us the belief that what we have has value or that it has a level of adeptness to it.
So what's bollocks about a contract?
Oh, it's Pete Clive. He makes you do it. They make you sign a contract.
He's a wanker.
Oh, he's a prick. You have to promise to behave, get a score on time, that sort of thing. Do it in your own right and write out and sign it.
Yeah, but let's just concentrate on getting you out of here, out of this room. We can sort out the world tomorrow.
I'm not signing any contract.
Well, forget about the contract. Forget about it. All it means is cooperation, and that's what's important. We must cooperate.
I faced this a lot when I was looking at writing a book, and it was so funny when, you know, if there was a book written by somebody with 3 letters after their name, it would get more credit and more sort of, more distribution than somebody writing a similar book, but with only their life experience. And it's like, well, why is this? And it's all because of authorizing authority and this sort of mutual appreciation society of maintaining things as they are. And this is the big challenge we're up against, which is the illusion of our desire for change.
I don't spend my life watching my P's and Q's because some mingy little fucker like you is going to write all down on a piece of paper. Your case conference is coming up. What's your step? Bollocks! I'll say what I want to say. You've got decisions to make about my life, you get on with it. It's got bugger all to do with me. In here, it's just the same as school. Do what we tell you. Think what we tell you. Say what we tell you. Squawk. Be a fucking parrot. I hate you for putting me in here. You bullshitters!
Where part of us states all the time, we want to change and we'll have these big aspirations. But if we look at the reality of how much of our deeply ingrained habits we've managed to change, for a lot of us, there's still quite a lot on the list. And I found this really interesting thread that came from that, because when I've been hearing all these cases and people phoning me up and sending me emails and sending me letters, describing their cases, describing their situations, and I had this epiphany moment when I realized there was a distilled similarity, and the message was, authority is not listening to me. Okay? The authority out there in the world is not listening to me. When I'm encountering my policeman or my council staff or my corporate service provider, they don't appear to be listening to me. And I considered it and I pondered it, and then I had this little brain flash moment where I realized, if you look at what you have learned in the last 5 or 10 years, and I'm only talking about the stuff that you think is important and relevant, okay? Forget the rest. I'm only talking about the stuff you think is important and relevant, the stuff that has really impacted you and you know you need to act on.
Yeah, they got you here, little wanker. It's your file, look. Everything these fuckers have ever said about you.
For my case conference.
Fucking execution, mate. It's your school, look. Educational Welfare Officer's report. Confidential report to Juvenile Court. Subject, Errol Dupre. End of term clinic report. Head of year report. Record of school offences. Arguing with a teacher. Disrupting assembly. Kick football into staff face from close range.
He kicked me.
Racist remarks. Fucking hell. Damage calculated by taking it to pieces. Confidential referral form for admission to special unit.
I don't know nothing about no special unit.
Marked contract by Errol Dupre. Is this your writing?
Yes, the contract.
What do you write with, Emma?
A pen.
I have to behave myself at Hooper Street at all times. I must obey the staff and teachers at Hooper Street, and if I do go home, I must behave myself and listen to my mum. Obey the teachers, listen to your mum. I have to be up at 8 every morning and wash and get dressed and have my breakfast and get ready for school and reach there at 5 to 9 every morning. Did you write this, Cobblers?
They make you do it.
Signed by yours sincerely, Errol Dupre. Assessment report on Errol Dupre. Your case conference coming up, is it, eh? Psychiatric report. The future. It seems unlikely for this child to return home, his mother having rejected him for her own lifestyle. Bearing this in mind, future care seems to be the alternative. We would recommend a care order be made in order to be able to continue our assessment of his needs. You're in here for life, mate.
And now I want to know, how much have you actually implemented into your daily routine? Honestly, let's just be mature about it and be honest. As a bunch of casual fellow journeyers on the road, it's not 50%, is it? Well, for most of us, we'll be lucky if it's 20 or even 10. We're very good at referring to it and talking to it or having our little magical moments of it, but in terms of a sustained application, we have not managed to meet our own aspirations. What that translates to is that your internal authority is not listening to your aspirations, inspirations, motivations. The authority that you spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with, that governs your daily perambulations and reaching out and clutchings in the world for whatever they might be, that is not listening. That's what it means. Now here's the irony. The irony is, there we are, an authority that we spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with, we can't get it to listen to us, but we stamp our feet like petulant kids when an authority we encounter for 15 minutes, once every couple of months, doesn't listen to us.
I told you to keep your hand off that buzzer.
I'm a juvenile offender. You can't keep me in a cell. I know you.
Do ya?
I've been charged now. You can't keep me in the cell. You got to send me back to the assessment centre.
Shut your mouth, will you? Just shut it.
You got to look after me. Give me something to eat.
You see this? Sit down and shut your fucking rabbit.
PC Hansen.
Shut it. You're straight into court Monday. And you ain't going back to no assessment centre. You're going straight to a detention centre. Or Borstal. And when you come out, we are going to be waiting outside the gate for you, and we're going to put you in a car, and we're going to bring you straight back down here. And we're going to take your fingerprints. We can't do that now, juvenile offender. But once you've been to a DC or Borstal, we can screw you, and we will. We got you now. And once we got your fingerprints, we're going to do you for every unsolved taking and driving away in this district, stretching back over months, and that's a lot of cars, I can tell you. And you'll go down and you'll stay down for years, we'll see to that.
Sounds great.
Does everyone see the somewhat irony, somewhat arrogance, somewhat naivety of that situation? Do we believe that we're co-creators of our reality? Does anybody believe that here, or think that? Yeah. I think most of us will have had some evidence in the last couple of years that manifestation can just kind of happen sometimes, can't it? Things can just appear or disappear. Have you noticed that? It's an amazing thing. So then it makes it even more important, doesn't it, that what we think about we have to be really careful with, super careful with. So the problem that we then have is, well, surely you would think the things that you're most aspirational about and that you're most interested in, surely that should be straightforward enough to implement into daily routine. But it's not, is it? Has anybody tried it with something in their life that a change they wanted to make, but it didn't quite pan out? Now the funny thing is, that'll happen to all of us. Yes? That'll happen to all of us. And the biggest mistake that we all make is to just continue with the relapse, if you know what I mean. That we don't just keep going up against it again and again and again and again. Don't get me wrong, in some things that we do, but in others that we don't. And the reason I mention it is because I think what's needed beyond anything, it's like, I've been doing these events for like 7 or 8 years now, and I'm constantly hearing people saying, we need more people. We need to get more people in these rooms. We need to do this event again, but get more people. Let's do it again next month, and I'll bring some people, and let's get more people. We need to get more people awakened. And what I've learned, what I've kind of realised, and what I think is, I don't think that's true. I'm not convinced it's true at all. I actually think the people that do know and that have awakened to it need to bloody well act on it. That's the problem. I don't think we need more people. The funny thing is, I really do believe, and it's not just belief. I do loads of events, as some of you know, but a lot of them are about not just social evolution, which is really what I classify this sort of subject as, but also stuff about personal development and other issues going on a planetary level. And I find it, you know, I do have this belief that or this idea that there's only one human on the planet, and we're all like cells of that human. We're cells of an agency on this planet, and even though we like to group, the reality is we do all have an individual story and an individual tale to tell, and that means an individual role to play out. And if you look at the cells in your body, it's always a great example. You know, we're built up in a mirror of that. And if you look at your body, no two cells are the same. The brain doesn't stand there having a go at the heart for doing a crap job all the time, and the liver isn't poking fun at the kidneys. But we do that to each other, don't we? We have this thing where we finger point, we measure, and we do all this sort of stuff. Now, so just for a second now, I'd like you all just to lift up your left hand for me. Okay. And now I want you to put it down. Okay. Can anybody tell me how they did it? Okay. Does your hand understand what you're asking it to do, or does it just do it? So why do we think every single human being needs to understand what needs to be done? What percentage of your total makeup understands? 15% of your total cellular makeup? If that. I'm suggesting the same might be true for our species as a whole. And perhaps what we need to learn is how to create movement. Because what's interesting is, we don't know how we move our hand, we just do it. And if we can re-enter that part of our awareness that got us to that position of moving hands, maybe we can bring about the changes that we need. But the reason I mention it is, I don't think we need to get every human being on the planet to understand what's going on. But I do think the ones that do know, we need to get better at acting on what we know. And I'm not suggesting it's easy at all. I've not done it. I'm still wrestling through it. But this is the point, is I think we need to enter a level of maturity, over the honesty of the story bubbles that we tell about ourselves.
It's the same when I was at school. I said when I was bored, when I didn't want to do a lesson, when I wanted to have a fag, when I wanted to tell a teacher to fuck off for being a wanker, or kick him in the teeth. But they couldn't take it. They didn't want me to be honest in that way. That's why they don't have lessons in honesty. 9 till 10:30 honesty. Because I don't want the kids to say what they're really thinking and feeling inside their heads. They had lessons like that, they'd lose control. Wouldn't be able to smack you around the head when they feel like it. You just want me to be honest when you take me down the neck. It's a fair cop, Garth. And when I fill out a form, be honest. Don't cheat. Don't carry a knife. Bend over, let me search you, make notes about you, keep files on you. If I'm honest, I've got nothing to worry about, have I? You're protecting me from the dishonest buggers, aren't you? But I can't look at the files. What's read out by the magistrate? What those fuckers said about me at school? What's on the police computer? It's all a lot of bollocks. We're not talking about honesty, we're talking about sticking to the rules. All those honest people out there are just sticking to the rules, but they lie and they fucking cheat all the way. And just think they're being honest because they swallowed the bollocks they've been handed, they've been conned. But I've not been conned. That's why you can stick your hairy contract up your hairy arse. It's a dishonest con.
Because this brings me on to the second point. So I'm going to write authority up because we're going to keep revisiting these 3 words tonight as a nice, simple thing. So the first one is authority. Okay. So one of the things that I liked about the sovereign and the free man movement when I first encountered it was that I saw people facing the challenges of their personal power, the challenges of their self-expression based on their belief, what they believe to be true in a often, sometimes selfish, but often altruistic perspective. And they were going up against authority, and it became initially this petulant foot stamping. There was a lot of that going on, a lot of anger. And over time, excuse me, I realised that, or as I was watching it, I saw that people were wanting methods and templates and things like that. And you could see countless, well not countless, but loads of people all trying the same method, but everybody getting a different response. Everybody having a different effect. For some people they were effective, for others they weren't. And I found there was a common thread amongst all the people who were effective in the sovereign and free man movement. A common thread amongst every one of them. And it had nothing to do with their method, no matter what any of them will tell you. What it had everything to do with was their ability to connect to the human being. Their ability to connect to the humanity in another person, so that that person would put the role down, the role that they were standing in. Because that's what you're up against at first, a person, and there's a role standing between them. And I saw that all these people, regardless of the method they used, they were able to connect to the human being behind them. And that was the tempering force. Because otherwise, authority unchecked became just as bullying in the other direction. So yeah, you had people who were feeling that they'd been bullied by authority most of their life, and as they were finding their own authority, they were becoming the bully. The only people that weren't were the ones who were tempering it with their humanity, which is the second word I'm going to write on the board. Because there's a really interesting thing about this humanity thing, because
Get rid of this, shall we?
Évidemment.
Thank you, Peter. At least you can spell. Harry Parker, your social worker, I know Harry very well. He says you're bright, says you're worth a bit of bother.
I wouldn't take the time if I were you.
Don't be clever, don't be smart. We've no time to waste, get that. There's plenty of other kids we could be dealing with. If you really want to behave like a moron, we'll put you with all the other morons under lock and key at Ashmere House, and I can do that. I'll have you transferred to a secure unit. We'll do your assessment from there. If you're going to stay here, let's make it clear. You're going to have to step into line. Just a sec. You're going to have to step into line, and you're going to have to cooperate. No, that shouldn't be too difficult. We're a reasonable lot.
I'm not signing any contract.
how many people here think they're, you know, fairly humane individual? You know, you kind of, you're not going out to hurt anybody, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I would say you all look pretty humane individuals for me, you know. But there's this, again, the story that we describe of ourselves is perhaps not as honest as we would like to believe. And that's what I want to consider tonight, because I'm going to make an observation. It can't be an observation because I don't know most of you, so call it an accusation if you like. Obviously meant in the nicest possible way and not intended to affect your internal state at all. But I'm going to suggest that every one of you drip feeds your humanity on a daily basis. You drip feed it. So what I mean by that is that in amongst a group of like-minded people like this, you'll be nice as pie, happy, smiley, happy to share your deepest thoughts and concerns or whatever that might be. But there's other situations where you won't. And what I'm going to suggest is that actually for each of us, we have a different persona we present in numerous situations in life. So not everybody, because everybody in the path of awakening looks to break down these barriers between the aspects of our life. But for most of us, there's still an us we are around our parents to some extent, an us we are around our loved one or friends, the us that we are at work, the us that we are as we're walking down the street, the us that we are when we're in the shops, and various things like that. And so now I do just invite you to consider, do you actually have the same level of humanity in all of those situations? We don't, do we? And it's an interesting point, because the second distillation that I got from all of these people in the Freeman and the Sovereign movement, is the distillation that's been happening, wasn't just that authority wasn't listening. The second thing I heard and distilled was, I'm having a less humane experience. People were saying, I'm having a less humane experience from my service providers, my corporate entities, the police in the street, the council staff. It's less humane, and I'm not happy about it. You know, I want you to treat me like a human being and not a number and all the rest of it. But then if we revisit the whole thing about drip feeding humanity, my question is, who withheld humanity first? Was it the service providers or was it us? And then who is the responsible? I think it's a chicken and egg. I see you eyeing that up there, exactly, because I think it's chicken and egg. I don't think we'll be able to backtrack that and work it out. But I am willing to suggest that if we're willing to suggest that we're co-creators in our reality, which most of you did put your hands up to, then I wonder whether we are the agents of our own inhumanity or the agents of our own inhumane experience. And that we are mirroring and building a mirror of authority not listening and inhumanity. And it's terrifying, because it is getting worse in that respect. And when you're in situations with people, I've been in many situations where it just isn't simple. It just isn't simple, you know. You've got to be able to look at things from other people's points of view.
Well, let's look at that, shall we? Let's give your intelligence the benefit of the doubt. Mr. Parker says you're a bright lad, and I respect his opinion. So I have a particular interest in you. Personal, between the two of us. I want you to prove to me you're worth all the time and effort that we're prepared to put into you. Your big break, this. Does not give you a second chance. All right.
All right.
Good.
I've been at a number of festivals recently where people were moaning about the security and the security guards affecting their sovereign rights to carry a bottle of glass and blah, 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 or whatever it might be, and how bolshy the guards were with them or the security were with them. And it was like, well, actually, you were speaking to that security guard at 10 o'clock at night, you were probably being a bit foot stampy, and you're probably the 5,000th person that day that tried to exert their freedom and sovereignty. Give your brother a break, How would you feel in that situation? And it's interesting how we choose when we want to feel powerful, or we choose when we want to make a point. And I just wonder how often we're, there's how much of it is ego at play, or how much of it is picking the wrong target. It's a lot of ego. But I'm using it as an example of where we often pick completely the wrong targets to exercise our authority. And we end up becoming the agents of inhumanity. And then we're wondering why next year that security guard is even more bitter and angry than he was last year. It's like, well, because he's had 5,000 so-called awakened people choosing him as being the agent of their expression of their authority because they're too afraid to do it at the council offices. or they're too afraid to do it in front of a uniform. And say, well, actually, your authority is really that big then, isn't it? In fact, it's smaller than that, it's that big. Because you're choosing easy targets. You're choosing people that can't fight back.
So let's take a look at what life's got in store for you. Go back a few steps, see just how clever you've been so far. For a kick-off, you've just been to court, haven't you? When was it?
Thursday. Yesterday.
Just yesterday. You've been to court before, haven't you? Right?
Right.
Still being clever, still being smart. So what were the most important things that happened to you before you went to court? Can you remember that far back, eh? You started off here at home. H-O-M-E spells home. And there's your mum, your dad, all the rest of them. And just like any other mum and dad, all they ask you to do, all you have to do is to go to school. Now, that's not too much to ask, is it? You're clever, bright. Everybody wants you to succeed. Nobody wants a failure on their hands. Get the right qualifications, make your way in the world. But you didn't want to go to school, did you? You knew best. So you started bunking off out the gate, over the fence. And your teachers are concerned, because they're there to help. They don't want to see you get behind. So they go and see your mum and dad.
My teacher's ever been to my house.
No matter. They talked to your mum and dad, didn't they? And they told you to get your ass back into school. They know you have to go. But you still didn't listen. Out the gate, over the fence. Before you know where you are, your mum and dad get a visit from the education welfare officer. Got a visit from him, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's right. Because the EWO's there to make sure you go to school. And if you don't, he gives the nod to the appropriate authority. And that spells trouble.
Or the worst thing is in security guards, when they choose to fight back, it gets messy. You know, that's the problem. And then everybody then gets upset about security, don't they? So I'm only using that as a live example because it was something that came up very recently at 2 festivals that I was at. And it's a common thread at a number of them. And so people are obviously going there because they want to let their hair down because they believe they're away from authority. And it's the wrong place. It's like people also want to go away to experience humanity. Or they want to go away to experience community. Let's go and live in community somewhere. We want to go and buy some land and live in community. I say, well, what's outside your door? What is it that's outside there right now? Because the whole point of tonight's talk is, if you remember the stories I mentioned at the beginning, my concern is that for every single one of those stories, comets, ascension, aliens, blah, blah, bombs, you know, whatever, most of them will involve some kind of systemic shutdown where the net and the web may not be there for you. And so who is going to be there? Is it going to be your codenamed buddy from the forum that you've got all cozy and pally-pally with over the last couple of years, but lives in Botswana? It's not going to be them, is it? Instead, it is going to be the people outside the front door. And I just invite people to consider, how are you going to feel in that situation? So just say it has happened, whichever story bubble you wanted popped.
Now, at this point, a lot of kids get a bit of sense. They get themselves together. They get back to school. They listen. But you didn't listen, did you? The education welfare officer visits 4, 5, 6, even 7 times, tries to help, discover the problem. A lot of time and expense, and all because you don't want to go to school. The EWO reaches his limit. So he sends your parents a letter threatening to take you to court for non-attendance. But that does nothing, absolutely nothing. So there's a summons. And you go for the very first time to court, your debut. First appearance, send him home for a test attendance, for whatever good that'll do. You're supposed to go to school for 21 days straight, but you foul up after the 3rd or 4th day and back you go again. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 breaks. 6 chances to get yourself straight, get your ass back into school, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times you've blown it. Now, am I not right?
Yeah.
You know, we can all give a round of applause at being right, that the system was rubbish and we let it fail and we all stood there. Yes, we were right, we were right. Bugger, there's no food. Oh no, there's no petrol, there's no electricity. Oh my goodness, you know. And the people really haven't thought it through for a lot of their story buzz. And I'm certainly not, I am not an agent of doom and fear in that respect. I'm not suggesting anybody go out and stock up on food or anything like that. But what I am suggesting is to enter into that sense of feeling as, how will you feel? Because if you'll feel okay and you're all right talking to your neighbours, then cool. But I know a lot of people, especially in urban zones, that don't feel that strong and confident about it. And in actual fact, they would feel very small and very fearful in that sort of situation. And there's a lot of people like that, especially in cities.
But you weren't just bunking off, were you? You had to do something with all that free time. So you did a bit of thieving. First 2 or 3 times you get caught, you get taken down the neck, and some policeman tells you off, shouts at you. Next time you get a caution. This time a sergeant in full uniform shouts at you. That doesn't make a damn bit of difference, because you're apparently deaf to any kind of reason. You go on nicking and making a general bloody nuisance of yourself, when you should be here learning something useful. But it's burglary, shoplifting, TDA, touching the dog's arse, taking and driving away. And back you go to court. They're getting to know you now. So you get fined or sent to the local police attendance centre. Kept off the streets all day Saturday, made to scrub floors by another loud policeman when you could be watching West Ham lose at home. The magistrates don't know what to do with you. They're all greengrocers and shopkeepers. So, they send you here to us for assessment. So, what we're going to do with you? We could recommend you go home.
What?
But they won't have you. So are we going to get rid of you? Foster parents? Never. Children's home? A joke. CHE Detention Centre, Borstal. Well, a pity about CHE, Community Home with Education, appealing both to your intellectual brilliance and your public spirit. What used to be called an approved school at CHE. You could have been king of the mafia. Lots of lick-me-arse power trips for ambitious young 15-year-olds, and you've just turned 16. Bad luck. Not much left to bring you in line, is there? Short, sharp shock at the local detention centre, a Borstal.
And what the whole point of tonight is to get us to a point where we can feel armed to create situations for ourselves which will allow us a measured and managed growth, so that if those stories do pop, we didn't sit back and just wait for story fixes. We prepared ourselves so that our internal integrity could withstand that sort of challenge.
2 simple lessons you're going to have to learn, DC or Borstal. 1, discipline. 2, respect for authority. You're going to have to learn it, so you might as well learn it now. This is an open invitation to you to cooperate, Trevor, for your own good. DC, 7 out of 10 coming out of detention centres, 8 out of 10 leaving Borstals, re-offend, commit crimes, that is, within 2 years.
Which is very much about these 2 things checking off each other, because what's interesting is, if your authority can be tempered with your humanity and be motivated by it, you arrive at the 3rd word of tonight's talk, which is, the result is community anyway. It is community. Because another little distillation that I'd noticed was, I've been around quite a few communities in this country where they've gone off to go and live in community. And it's so funny because very few of them make it long term. And even the ones that have lasted a while, it's almost sadly hilarious that they're falling into all the same old traps of the existing culture. So they've gone away and they've ended up with bitterness, backstabbing, hierarchies, rules, regs, all the rest of it, and all the stuff they were trying to get away from. And I kind of realised why it is.
So, here you are, fresh out of Borstal. What's the first thing you're going to need, Peter?
A job.
A job. Peter, how many unemployed do we have at the moment?
Millions.
Exactly. So what chance have you got with your spots and your record of getting a job against a lad with O and A levels and a decent haircut?
About nil.
Optimistic. So, no job. What do? Sign on the dole. How much is that worth to you? Place to live, food in your gut, a bit of fun, nothing is gone, broke. No job, no prospects, no cash. So what do? And you're back here. And all because you were too damn stupid when you were here, nicking sweets from the local tuck shop. Well, they've tried all this. You know, this didn't work, not with you.
I don't really know what else can be done in terms of what would be needed to be the appropriate kick up the backside to implement the changes that we need to make. And I'm saying this speaking to myself as well. It's like, am I going to need somebody to drop a big fat bomb on my neighbours?
So what's left? And you're on the bandwagon, boy. and you won't get off. Prison, locked up like an animal. A job, no prospects. Dole, no cash. Thieving, no more chances. Prison, an animal. Round and round you go. Well, those are your options. And you've created them. You've brought it all upon yourself. Before you kick another door down, before you kick another chef in the bollocks, before you do anything, think. You may not get another chance. Settle down, we'll have another little chat on Monday.
And I really don't want for that to be the case. I really, really don't. And that's why, I mean, I'll get on to the People's Public Trust at the end, but and when they're in each other's space a lot, exactly, tension happens, tension builds. And if you've not got the structures in place to deal with it, and I don't mean talking sticks, okay, that's not it. You know, it's not, I wish, for goodness sake, can we please evolve beyond the talking stick? Please, universe, honestly, humanity, if we still require a stick to get anywhere and a conversation, then we are woefully, woefully less developed than we'd like to fantasize that we are. No, but we're trying to create an unrealistic modality on ourselves. And these communities are the evidence that it can't work. Because they've shown that we have not yet built the correct structures to handle our human foible. The foibles of the stuff that we don't understand about ourselves. The fact that we're not all masters of our emotional and mental expression. We've not factored that in. The talking stick doesn't cut it, because people go away after a talking stick session. That's not it, is it? So this is, I mean, a lot of the events that I do, other than this, the workshopy ones, are about giving and taking space. But certainly, I think the theme for this year, for us as a species, is about giving and taking space. Giving people the space to be where they're at and to have whatever imperfect foibles that they do without taking it personally. But owning your own and owning where you're at as well. And if we can get into a space of that sort of not leaning on each other and not letting others lean on us, then we're in with a chance of hitting the start point. And the start point is when each of us own the uniqueness of our contribution. That we can exercise authority tempered by humanity to arrive at community. Because this is the point, because the reality is, the new community is not something that we've ever had. It's an idealism that isn't mapped out, isn't it? We all have our own sense of it, our own feeling of it, but has anybody ever sat down and done a bullet point list of what community means to them? Have you ever sat down and done a bullet list point of what you would like to, how you would like to see yourself in a few years' time? I've never either, you know. I'm not suggesting that we should, you know, and I'm not, but I'm only mentioning it because we've got to acknowledge where we're a bit nebulous and where we're a bit woolly. And actually sometimes in some situations, let's just be mature about it and nail it down a bit clearer. Get rid of the assumptions, get rid of the ambiguities, make it all a little bit clearer. Give people the respect for maybe being in a different place from where you are. You know, how many times have you been in situations where the whole point's been lost because somebody else thought they were there for something completely different? Or they thought you were talking about something completely different? And how often do we check that we've actually got, you know, shared the right point? It's a really funny thing how much is actually assumed and ambiguous and all the rest of it.
You were a constant truant at school, a failure it seems. You've been before the court on numerous occasions for non-attendance. You have been convicted of taking and driving away, shoplifting, violent behavior, and in spite of your undertakings to the court, you have made no attempts to secure yourself a job. And now you've been accused of stealing once again, and you've attacked a member of the immigrant community and caused damage to his property. It's a long, depressing list. Are you not ashamed of yourself?
No.
Really, the point of all of this is because I am desperate for you guys to tell your story. I'm not interested in you thinking anybody else's story of the world. I want to hear yours. I don't care how mad it is. I don't care what planet you think you came from. I don't care what universe it is. I don't care what fairy kingdom you're in touch with. I don't care what art you do. I don't give a monkeys. I really don't. I just want it to be yours. That's it. I just want it to be yours. I want to hear that. That's it. I want you to live that. And I want to empower that wherever possible. And I'm not interested in anything else, because if we can't do it, then it's going to be the next big bang, because there's no choice. I've had quite an interest in I saw at the beginning of the year there was a massive investment in geo-engineering. Some of you call them chemtrails. I just want to say, I hate the term chemtrails. I never use them. I only use them so that people can draw the link between that and geo-engineering. Don't go searching for chemtrails. Go searching on Google for geo-engineering and find out how much money and time has been poured into it in this country. It's now mentioned on the Parliament's website. The Guardian have a regular page. The Independent have a regular page. There's talk of regulation on the Parliament's website because it's happening and they don't know who's doing it and they don't know why and they don't know how to manage it. And I don't know if any of you have noticed, but I've been watching it. I want to do a talk on it in a bit because I've got loads of photos and videos of geoengineering is conscious weather modification to reverse assumed man-made weather change. And there's two strategies being used in this country. Again, you can read about it on the Parliament's website. I'm not making it up. It's not a conspiracy. If anybody thinks it is, please step outside so I can stamp on your head a few times because I'm not making it up. I've now got my mum mentioning this on her Facebook page because she got the source off the Parliament's website. The point is, there's maniacs out there who, because they spend most of their life in a lab, think the way to cool the planet is actually to block the sun. And what they're doing is a lot of these high wispy cloud layers you're seeing being laid are what's called SRM, and it's solar radiation management. And so these cold days that you're getting that are a bit too cold for June have been because of some of the chemicals they're laying to try and cool things down because of how intense the planet is being impacted by solar rays. I just want to say something about solar rays for a moment. Seems a bit unrelated, but it's very related. Does everybody here understand that the heat you feel from the sun is not thermal? And by that I mean it's not like standing around a fire where you go, ooh, toasty. The tingle you feel on the skin may feel the same, but it's not the same. Space is cold. If the sun was like a fire, space would all be warm, wouldn't it? But it's not. So we need to pay attention to the fact that these rays that are coming from the sun are destined for us. They're meant to be landing. They're not meant to be getting deflected. They're meant to be hitting every life form on this planet. And if you look at the amount of geoengineering that goes on, it is absolutely astronomical. It's incredible. Bill Gates put billions into it at the beginning of the year when he also invested in the mass vaccination program in Africa. And that's what's seen some of the massive goings on of it this year. And I'll tell you what, that really got my attention because I was watching this going on. I started to mention it a little bit just to always, just sensing people out. And the number of people that were unwilling to pay attention to their own sensory information based on their own life experience and instead needed to read somebody else's spells to get a gist of it, that terrified me more than anything else about our sense of hope. And up until the last 6 months where this has been going on large scale, I'd always been overwhelmed with the hope and absolutism of our humane victory. But to see the ongoing apathy in response to the madness that's being dropped on our heads, it's like, okay, you can avoid the water and filter away. You can avoid the toxic chemical food and go and grow your own produce. But you don't know what's spraying from the sky, you don't know what's landing on your so-called organic produce, you can't stop breathing it in, and this is what I've got just now is so-called hay fever. I don't know what it is. I'm coughing and I'm spluttering, I feel like I've got glass in my chest. I don't know what it is, I've never had hay fever like this before, but it's arrived. It could be pollen, it could be something else, how am I meant to know? But my concern was off the back of that, just watching the ongoing apathy and the return to the story fix, the return to the story bubble. It's all right, we've only got a few more months to wait. I started to curse and think, do you know what? Oh dear. And then when people came to me and they said, what should we do? What can we do? I'm getting to the stage where all I can say is pray. Because the ongoing apathy in response to the level of stimulation, where it's not just in your face in the food, it's in your face in the sky every day. And we still are not moved to act. Then we just got to wait to see which story decides to manifest, which one pops, and what happens. But again, the onus is on the so-called awakened, because I think they can divert from that path. They are responsible and accountable and capable of, between us, engineering a smooth transition and engineering a smooth sort of journey, but only if we can claim these three things. And the number one thing is, first of all, the authority of your life is authorized. Okay, so the act of your birth was your authority. That's the point. The fact that you made it through that initiation of arriving here means that you are as divinely mandated as anybody or anything else. You're already authorized. When are you going to own it? Enough. The people stand above the government stand above citizens. And in America, we've taken the term citizen from them, but citizenship was actually created with the abolition of the slave trade. And it was so that slaves could be given the same rights as the free people, but without the same power. So the citizens were always going to be ascribed their rights and responsibilities by the government. And it was so that they could keep a finger on the ex-slaves. You know, whereas that's now been applied to everybody everywhere, and now obviously you have good citizenship classes at school, and citizenship is on the curriculum now. So all this is being not brought in for us, it's been brought in for a couple of generations' time, when it's totally normalised that everyone is a citizen who only has rights and responsibilities because the government gave them to them. And the standing as the people will be long forgotten by them.
Government is a creation of man, and a creation of man can never be above man. They always need your consent, and this is where your power really lies. With knowledge always comes power. The power not to fear, the power to take a stand against anyone or any corporation that threatens you, the power to say no.
For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal.
Geo-engineering, chemtrails, forced vaccinations, population control, weather modification, war games. We have not given consent. You cannot spray the atmosphere with toxic chemicals and expect no ramifications. These chemicals go into our food, our air, and our water supply. Ill effects of these have been recorded as headaches, flus, breathing problems, skin problems, and my major concern is Alzheimer's disease. Aluminium causes nerve damage. Fluoride in the water works with aluminium in the air to cross into our brains. At this moment, about 24,700 young people around the age of 30 and above have Alzheimer's. In the next 10 years, 400,000 people in Australia will have dementia. It is now the third leading cause of death in Australia. About 10 years ago, I did a degree in environmental management. It's concerning to me that in that short time, we were brainwashed to believe in population control, that our Earth could not sustain itself if we didn't intervene. The Earth has enough resources for everyone. We need to change our thinking, but also change our actions. If you have never heard of these terms before, then please start looking at the sky and make your own decisions. It's not like they can hide the spraying.
It's time to remove your footprint. Agenda 21 is coming soon.